There is something no one taught you in school. Something so profound, so close at hand, and so deliberately hidden that once you see it, you will never be able to look away. It isn't in history books. It doesn't appear in documentaries. And those who have studied it honestly have always encountered the same wall, the same resistance, the same institutional silence surrounding the truths that someone decided you shouldn't know. The year is 1582. The place is Rome. And what is about to happen is not just a calendar reform. It is the most sophisticated control operation history has ever known, a surgery performed on time itself, to excise something that had been alive in the mind of humanity for thousands of years. An entire month, erased, not lost, not forgotten, erased. Methodically, with authority, with the weight of an empire behind it, and for a reason that even today, more than 4 centuries later, no one has fully explained to you. To understand what really happened in 1582, you first need to understand something that official history rarely mentions. For most of human existence on this planet, time was not measured as we measure it today. There were no 12 months. There was no calendar like the one on your phone. What existed in cultures separated by oceans, by mountains, by millennia of distance, was something completely different, and yet astonishingly similar to one another. 13 months, 28 days each, a perfect cycle synchronized with the moon, with the human body, with the tides, with the growing seasons. The civilizations of ancient Egypt knew it. The Maya, more than 10,000 kilometers away, knew it. The Celts of the British Isles knew it. The indigenous peoples of North America knew it. The Mesopotamian cultures that built the first cities in history knew it. 13 moons, 13 months, 364 days plus one that belonged to no month, a day outside of time, a sacred day that ancient cultures reserved for contact with what lies beyond ordinary time. Why 13? Because the lunar cycle lasts approximately 29.5 days, and 13 complete lunar cycles add up to 382 days, which, rounded to the system of 28 perfect days, equals exactly 364, a number that, when divided, yields exactly 48 weeks with no leftover days, no irregularities, no months of 31, 30, or 28 that you were taught to memorize as a child as if they were natural. They are not natural. They are a decision. And here the true mystery begins. When did humanity stop using that system? Why did it abandon it? And who exactly made the decision to replace it? Rome. That is the answer. And not just any Rome, but the Rome of Julius Caesar, the very man whose name the calendar bears, the calendar that dominated the West for 1,600 years before 1582 came along and erased him as well. The Julian calendar, 12 months, 365 days, with a leap year every 4 years to compensate for the fraction that the system could not neatly absorb. Why 12? That is the question that historians of power elegantly evade. And the answer, when one finds it, is unsettling in its simplicity. Because 12 is divisible. 12 can be split into 2, into 3, into 4, into 6. 12 allows time to be organized into blocks that serve commerce, administration, tax collection, and territorial control. 12 is the number of control. 13, on the other hand, is prime. It cannot be divided into equal parts without something left over. 13 resists perfect division, and there are those who argue that this mathematical resistance was exactly what made it sacred to ancient cultures and exactly what made it dangerous to those who sought to administer time as one administers a conquered territory. But wait, because what happened in 1582 was not simply a continuation of what Caesar had begun. It was something far more radical, something that, if you look closely enough, begins to resemble less an astronomical reform and more a massive erasure operation. Pope Gregory III signed a papal bull that year, a declaration backed by the full weight of the Roman Church's authority, and the content of that declaration contained something that had never happened at any other moment in history. 10 days were going to disappear, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Thursday, October 4th, 1582, was followed by Friday, October 15th, 1582. 11 days that had existed in the Julian calendar, 11 days that people had lived through, that contracts recorded, that church archives contained. They simply ceased to exist in the new system. Can you imagine waking up one day and having official history tell you that the last 10 days of your life never happened? That the time you lived, the decisions you made, the memories you formed belong to a system that has been declared incorrect and will therefore be rewritten. But the erasure of those 10 days in October 1582 is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the most unsettling part of the story. What is unsettling is what does not appear in the papal bull, what is not mentioned in the official documents, what academic historians gloss over with the speed of someone who does not want to dwell too long on something uncomfortable. The 13th month, the month that is missing. When the Gregorian calendar replaced the Julian and definitively established the 12-month system in the Western world, the 13th month of ancient cultures was not simply left out. It was actively persecuted in its last surviving forms. The rural communities of Europe that still organized their sowing and harvesting according to lunar cycles were gradually integrated into the new system through the network of parishes dependent on Rome. The lunar calendars that survived on the margins of Western civilization, in the Celtic communities of northern Britain, in the agrarian traditions of the Alps, in the rural practices of the Slavic peoples, began a slow process of extinction that historians euphemistically call cultural assimilation. And along with the 13th month, something else disappeared, something that researchers of cultural behavior have documented without fully explaining it. The number 13 went from being sacred to being cursed. Pause here for a moment because this is no minor detail. There is no mathematical reason for the number 13 to be considered unlucky. There is no major religious tradition that explicitly condemns it. There is no internal logic that explains why, in most modern buildings, the 13th floor simply does not exist, why airlines eliminate row 13 from their planes, why Friday the 13th concentrates a collective anxiety that no Friday the 12th or Saturday the 14th produces. The superstition surrounding the number 13 is not ancient. It is surprisingly recent, and scholars who have attempted to trace its origin always end up in the same period, the centuries surrounding the consolidation of the Gregorian calendar within the same cultural milieu that decided 12 was the correct number for organizing humanity's time. Coincidence? It's possible. Anything is possible, but consider this. When a power structure wants to eliminate an idea, it rarely attacks it directly. Attacking it directly would give it visibility, bestow upon it the dignity of a martyr, and make it attractive precisely because it is persecuted. The most effective method is not prohibition, but contamination. It turns the idea into something dirty, something that causes shame or fear to be associated with it. It surrounds it with superstition and ridicule until no one wants to go near it, not out of conviction, but out of the social instinct not to be seen as someone who believes in dangerous things. The number 13 was not banned, it was poisoned. And while the number 13 was being poisoned in the collective imagination, the 12-month system expanded at the same speed as the power of the European colonial powers. Because here is the connection that is rarely mentioned. The Gregorian calendar traveled the world alongside the armies of conquest. When European empires arrived in the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, they did not arrive only with weapons and diseases. They arrived with a system for organizing time, and that system was not neutral. To reorganize a people's time is to reorganize their way of perceiving reality. It is to sever their connection to the cycles that had structured their agriculture, their medicine, their spirituality, their identity. It is, in the most literal sense of the word, a way of conquering not only the territory, but the mind. The indigenous peoples of the Americas who organized their planting according to the 13 lunar cycles of the year saw that knowledge declared superstition. African agrarian traditions based on the lunar calendar were labeled primitivism. The Mayan astronomical system, which contained an understanding of time so sophisticated that it still astounds modern astronomers, was called paganism, and its codices were burned, most of them burned. 13,000 years of accumulated astronomical knowledge burned. And upon the ashes the 12-month calendar, orderly, controllable, divisible. But here is what troubles me most about this whole story, and it is what I want you to take with you when you leave this video. In 1930, a man named Moses Cotsworth presented a proposal to the League of Nations, the international body that existed before the United Nations. A new calendar, or more precisely, a very ancient calendar dressed in modern language, 13 months, 28 days each, 364 days plus an additional day with no month name at the end of the year, and a second additional day in leap years. A perfect regular system where every month has exactly 4 weeks and the first day of each month always falls on the same day of the week. The proposal was evaluated. It was supported by companies around the world that saw its mathematical regularity as a huge economic advantage. It was backed by such unexpected figures as George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, who went so far as to implement that calendar internally in his company for decades. It was seriously and formally debated for years, and it was rejected. The official reason cited in historical documents is that certain religious traditions objected to a system where the weeks would not align perfectly with the standard calendar. The seventh day, the sacred day of rest in Abrahamic traditions, would be disrupted by the extra day without a specific day of the week at the end of the year. It is a legitimate reason. It is a real conflict. But it is also exactly the kind of reason that fits perfectly when you want to reject something without mentioning the real reason. Because the real reason, the one that no one articulates in official documents, but that anyone familiar with history can infer, is simpler and darker. The 13th month would have given humanity back something that was taken from it in 1582. Not just a month on the calendar, a way of perceiving time that cannot be perfectly controlled, perfectly managed, perfectly divided into the blocks that power needs to operate efficiently over human lives. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to take it to the most honest place in your mind before answering. How many times in your life have you felt that the time you live in doesn't match the time you feel? That there is something in the rhythm of the official calendar that runs counter to something deeper, more visceral, harder to name than the simple exhaustion of Mondays or the joy of Fridays. There are those who attribute that feeling to modern stress, to capitalism, to the acceleration of technology. And it may be all of those things at once, but it may also be something older. The echo of a system of time that was designed not to synchronize with the cycles of the planet and the human body, but to synchronize with the cycles of control and production. A system that for 4 centuries has functioned with such efficiency that most of us never stop to wonder if the time we live in is the only possible time, or if there were others, and if those others were abandoned or erased. The difference between abandoned and erased matters. It matters a great deal. What is abandoned can be revisited. What is erased must be reconstructed from scratch. And erasing always requires an effort that no one makes without a compelling reason behind it. The 13th month did not disappear because humanity forgot it. It disappeared because someone decided in Rome in 1582 that a world with 12 months was more manageable than a world with 13. That time should be the property of the system and not of the human body or the cycles of the cosmos. And along with that month, 4 centuries of superstition organized around the number that represented it disappeared, For centuries of conquests that exported the system to every corner of the planet, and 4 centuries of rejected proposals to restore what was taken away. What you see when you look at a calendar today is not the natural way of measuring time. It is a decision made by specific power structures at specific historical moments, with objectives that did not always align with the well-being of the people that time sought to organize. And that, from my perspective, is something worth knowing, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if it raises more questions than answers, even if there are forces, institutional, cultural, economic, that would prefer you to keep looking at your 12-month calendar as if it were the only one that has ever existed or could ever exist. If anything in this journey sparked a question you didn't have before, write it in the comments. I want to read it. Because uncomfortable questions are the only ones worth asking, and this community exists precisely to ask them together, without fear of the ridicule that always accompanies those who dare to question what the system takes for granted. Share this video with someone who believes that time has always been as we know it. It might be the first time that person stops to wonder who designed the clock we all follow without ever having chosen it. And subscribe, because this is just the beginning. There are layers beneath this story that we haven't explored yet, and next time, we're going much deeper.